Instruction, assessment, instruction. It's an ongoing process of evaluating student progress and refining the lesson, of communicating with students and guiding them along, of encouraging them to strive for excellence once they know the criteria. A school's goal is to support teachers in reaching their objectives and to create an environment where students can appreciate their journey of achievement.
Today our objectives are to investigate some double displacement reactions and also to learn how to write chemical equations.
I think teachers need assessment in order to improve in their craft as much as students need it in theirs.
Would anyone like to go first?
And if I think about the process that students have to go through in order to achieve excellence in their work, I think it's very similar for teachers. That process always involves trying something out, seeing what it is that makes good teaching, and naming that together.
If we think of assessment as a valuable opportunity to examine student work, it is also valuable to review the teacher's work. Teachers have many tools for assessing their own effectiveness in the classroom. In a standards-based environment, teachers can look to grade-level outcomes and benchmarks as goals, and then structure lessons and classroom assessments that help students meet those goals. Examining student work in a systematic way is essential to school improvement.
As you know, Mrs. McDougall and I want you to know what you're learning and why you're learning it, so we always have our objective. Our objective of today is to decide whether our game is fair or unfair. Why do you think we need to learn this, Bridget?
Problem solving.
Fourth grade teacher Jennifer McDougall and learning support specialist Joelle McQuiston work together in this classroom. Although they are not team teachers, they are comfortable blurring the lines between their job titles.
Who likes to play games?
Today's lesson deals with the concepts of chance events, possible outcomes, and odd and even products in a game setting. This lesson is designed to provide students plenty of time to explore.
Who can tell me what it means if an outcome is fair?
Equally likely.
Equally likely.
In the process of designing products for students to really show that they've mastered concepts and skills,
An even number is divisible by 2.
a teacher will use the standards and the frameworks from their state in order to name those products and those skills.
We've looked very carefully at state standards and then backed it down to the standards that we've developed for our own school district. And then from there, each teacher has to look at the standards according to the different grade levels and try to find assessments that relate to the specific standards for that grade level.
What you teach and how you assess it needs to be modeled after the kinds of things that the standards are showing us are important. Writing across the curriculum, reading across the curriculum, being able to use logical sequence, steps, solving problems.
On 2. You spun a 2, okay? And I spun a 1.
This lesson corresponds to the district standard on probability and predictions. Students are expected to perform simulations with concrete devices to predict the chance of an event occurring. The students spin and multiply their numbers from 2 spinners. For every even product, one student receives a point. The other receives a point for every odd outcome.
3. I got 1. I got a 4. So, okay, what did you get? 4 is all even. 2 times 1 equals 2, and 2 times 2 equals 4. Those are all even. And 1 times 2 equals 2, 1 times 3 equals 3, 1 times 4 equals 4, and 1 times 1 equals 1. So there will be 2 even and 2 odd. So you don't have a very fair chance of winning because all you can really have is 3 times 1 and all that stuff. So it wouldn't really work well. 2 even numbers would most likely win because they have more outcomes to be even. Equals 16.
The goal is to determine if the game is fair.
What did you originally think when you first started playing?
That it was fair, but then after I got into the game, I noticed that it started to be unfair.
Good. You're looking for some type of pattern. You're looking for something noticeable, something to happen with the data.
To successfully complete this lesson, students will write a report about their predictions,
it was unfair because
and how they would change the game to make it fair. After completing their report, they self-assess and then assess peers using a rubric.
I'm going to give myself a 4 because on this it says that if I have a visual what I will do to make it fair. I have lots of different ways.
In the end, I'm less concerned about whether a child gets a 4 or a 2 on the rubric, which is that evaluation part, which is not useful to a student in order to produce better work. But what I'm more interested in is the kind of conversations that rubric will generate about work.
I gave myself a 4 because my explanation is easy to understand.
I love when somebody says, I give it a 3, I give it a 1, and now let's talk about it, and give me your evidence. Cite for me, according to our rubric here, what are the qualities that you see?
I gave myself a 2 because I do not know how to change it to make it fair. Jess, you could think of some way that, like, you can make it fair, like you take away a number, an even number, like...
And I think it's in those conversations that the criteria for excellence becomes more and more clear to the students as they try to name the qualities that they use as evidence.
I guess at this time, since the lesson's finished, we should take a look at whether or not we feel we met the objective of the lesson.
After the class, the teachers reflect on how the assessment worked and consider modifications for next time.
I do like the rubric.
I like the rubric too.
And I think because we use the language, everyday language that we use, like
Absolutely.
student understands and explains. That's what we say every day.
Exactly. Made it more kid-friendly, more user-friendly.
So I don't really see anything that I would change in here, except for maybe chart or graph and just add visual.
Visual. When we want a visual, it doesn't really matter what kind of visual they give us.
Right.
But if we say a chart or a graph, they might just be, okay, I have to do a chart or a graph, and they might not be creative and come up with a different way of showing
because
it.
creative is down here, so we want to stick with that.
absolutely.
So I think we'll change that for next time.
It's important for a teacher to determine what every student in their class, no matter what their ability or what their learning style, needs to master in order to be able to move on. And there again, our state frameworks will provide an important document to help us to name what those standards must be.
I was impressed with Yasmin. She was evaluating maths paper. He wrote something on his paper. My paper was too short. And she said,
I think he should have got a 4 because it doesn't matter if his explanation is short or long. It just matters if the explanation makes sense.
and she looked at the rubric, she said, it doesn't matter, it's short, as long as it was complete.
So you could tell that she was really using the rubric.
Right, and she
using
said
that
that
language.
he understood whether it was a fair or unfair game, and he listed his outcomes, they were correct, and he had a visual.
Right.
So she was able to tell me all of that. And he was pretty happy with that. He was smiling, thinking, okay, I did a pretty good job for the first time. And then when I asked him to tell me what he gave Yasmin,
I agree with your explanation right here, that you got a 4.
he just said, I agreed with her, she did a good job. Like I said before, he needed to go back and explain, okay, well, she did a good job, but why? You know, what did she do that was good? So he did go back, reread hers, and he said, okay, well, it was easy to understand. It was complete. He gave her a 4.
Wow.
In addition to specific standards, like this one on probability and predictions, there are general standards that teachers should keep in mind throughout their lesson planning.
And I wanted to bring up some of the things that I heard Jermaine using, and some of the language that I heard him using, and also some of the things that are listed. I was extremely impressed with his ability to incorporate some of the words of the day and the vocabulary in his explanation. I see outcomes, I see fair, and as you're reading, you can see that Jermaine actually has used those words and incorporated them in his response. I was noticing that he used the word product, he used most likely, and also he used unlikely.
Really, we did 3 things today. We did reading, math, and writing.
A new emphasis on assessment requires educators to seek better ways to communicate what they notice about student learning to parents. This year, Coburn Elementary School created a new report card that uses descriptors directly related to the academic standards. But the state does not provide standards for all grades.
In our state, in language arts, the standards have been set at grades 3, 5, 8, and 11. We then had to look at what the benchmarks would be for the grades that have not been designated as standard years by the state. So we back mapped and established benchmarks for K1, 2, and 4 at the elementary level.
These report cards are not all the same.
Today, Principal John Hartman meets with parents to hear their feedback.
You'll notice that our upper grades have boxes where we can actually put letter grades in, and our third grade instrument that you have in front of you doesn't have a place for a letter grade. Does this give you enough to go on with regards to your child and how your child is doing?
Yes, and I think it does a far superior job to an A, B, or C letter grade. It does a couple of things. One, if you go down the list in terms of skills,
Right.
It's not simply reading, writing, speaking, and listening. There are different components under each one.
Each of these components on the report card is given a rating relative to the student's understanding of the appropriate standard. NA, not yet apparent. D, developing. NP, near proficient. P, proficient.
Mrs. Fulgenetti does a nice thing in that the regular homework and school classwork is graded using this same system. His reports, his paperwork comes back with either NA or a D or an NP or a P.
Now, when a lot of us went to school, we used to just get our letter grades. And now, this report card, we get a letter grade if you're in the upper grades, but it also tells you a lot more. So, what's an A mean, or what's a B mean, or what's a C mean? Do you feel that this instrument is holding the children more accountable?
Definitely, because you see what they're not doing or what they're not working at.
You can get an A in reading, but what does that mean? Does that mean you can read? Or when you look at this, it says you comprehend it, you can apply strategies. And that's one of the things that you see developing, especially in the lower grades. You can see that they're learning not just how to read in the old, C, Dick, and Jane books, but also that they know how to make strategies. They know the stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And these report cards definitely reflect better what they're doing on a daily basis.
The new report card is designed to provide details on what teachers are observing daily. This daily classroom assessment can be clearly articulated in the language of district and state standards. Ultimately, parents will see their children's growth over time and have a clear indication of what needs to be mastered by the 11th grade.
We have talked about focus while we're writing, what our topic is. We have talked about staying organized while we write.
In an effort to improve students' writing skills, the Penn Delco School District designed an instruction plan based on the state's expectations for 11th grade writing achievement. The plan names 5 domains: focus, content, organization, style, and conventions, and outlines benchmarks for each domain at each grade level.
And this is something we're really fabulous at, conventions, making sure we have capitals.
The domains really help me as a teacher stay focused and organized and on task.
Today, we're going to talk about content.
You need to be extremely scheduled, and that's what the domains allow us to do. They allow us to stay scheduled. We have enough time to teach each domain, and throughout the year, having the children continue to use each domain and develop as the year progresses. Our students take a writing sample twice a year in our district, all students across the district. They're scored by a committee, and then they come back to us.
What we want to do here this morning is review the data.
Rosemary Fowler, the language arts coordinator for the district, lets us know what our kids need work on.
Is there anything that you're seeing there that would also reflect on either what we saw at the district level or maybe even possible surprises when you look at some of the scores that you have for the children?
Well, I noticed that my class did very well in organization and conventions.
Does that surprise you?
No, because
It
I'm a grammar
surprised me.
stickler.
I know, it's surprised.
They need a lot of work on focus and content and, of course, style. They do sound like robots when they write.
Yes. I am surprised, I mean, I have a number of 3s here, and some of the 3s that I have surprised me for my students. So apparently the prompt was really helpful to them to keep them organized, because sometimes they don't seem organized. I get a lot of the and thens, and thens,
Well, I think
and
the
thens.
prompt, if you remember, ended with, and tell what happened next.
Next.
The state is assessing what we should be teaching in our classrooms. They are using a prompt approach to the writing. We also encourage teachers in the classroom to use the same model, that when, at the district level, when we do our assessments, that should not be the first time the students have been given a prompt to write to. It should not be the first time that the students are given feedback in the domains.
With the results of the writing assessment in hand, Ms. Fowler and the third grade teachers can structure lessons to help students meet the district's goals.
In style, we need to work on the word choice and the sentence structure, because this contributes to the writer's voice.
So starting with illustrations may be best. So if we
Yes.
look at illustrations, because they can tell the difference between the illustrations by the author.
Yes.
So then that can be transferred into the actual writing.
Right.
Rosemary, I have a question. What do you think about the paper bag princess for character development?
Oh, I think that would be an excellent example.
My kids really need work on character development. They don't tell the reader enough information.
And I think that writer is a good model. Might want to also consider some of his other works as well. That way you could help also not only do characterization, but establish voice.
What are you going to do with that? Maybe share with them how the character and illustrator showed the reader the different feelings, attitudes of the characters.
Can you tell me how it went so I can do it?
I'll let you know.
Yes, thanks.
In the spring, student writing samples will be assessed again at the district level to see how the students have progressed. These third grade teachers will take advantage of the next few months by adjusting their instruction in the 5 domains.
What's going to be most important is that you meet with the children and you focus your instruction on what their needs are, so that when we look at the spring assessment, we're going to see growth over time. And the only way you're going to know growth over time is if you are then evaluating their pieces of writing on a weekly basis by using the same domain scoring guide.
What's encouraging is I have seen growth with some of these children in the areas already since they've taken this writing sample.
So have I, especially in focus, because that's what we've been staying on. We've been really looking at focus and using your thing about the camera shot and just what you see there, and then also what you said about just drawing a picture, taking a snapshot, and staying focused on what that was. So that's making a difference in their grades in focus and how I'm seeing them grow there.
How are you weekly or daily, how are you assessing the improvement? Say in writing workshop, do you allow them turns to explain what they did that day or read their own stories, and then as a class, say, is that a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 on style today?
I know that I personally conference
That's what I
daily with each child and jot my notes. This way I can keep track of who needs what and who's doing well with what area.
I do the same thing, and I find that if I put it on their papers, they can then look at their papers and
Yes.
say, oh, I need to improve this, and then when they go to revisions, they can see, oh, she wants me to add some adjectives or stay focused, or I went off on a tangent
So
here.
you can actually write it at the top of their rough draft, saying style
exactly.
or conventions, and then when you go back to look at it, you see that rough draft, and you can keep that rough draft with their final
Right.
copies,
And
and you're
I-
able to assess it that way.
Right. So when they finish up a piece of work, they have their pre-write, they have their draft, then they have their revision, something that's edited and we've marked on, and then sometimes we will go to final copy, like a published piece. Sometimes we don't get to that point because of time constraints. But they have, by the time we hit the revisions, they've covered as much as they can and really improved their pieces. And they all go into the working portfolio.
And what's nice is with the working portfolio, the children are able to see the progression they've made, which is a major motivator for them. I can do this.
We were just putting some of our pieces into our working portfolio the other day, and they had opened up the pieces that they had done in September and October, and like, oh my gosh, look at this! This is what I did then, and they can see the growth over time. So opening up those portfolios makes a difference in them, because they can say, hey, wait a minute, I am growing.
And they're able to assess themselves.
Right.
And you're going to write the name of your main character.
The teachers use the district assessment information to design lessons to strengthen their class's weaknesses.
This way, when you start your first draft, you'll have a lot of specific details. Your content will be focused. Today was content, and content was one of the things that our children needed to work on. And that's why I chose to go into the character development as part of content. Developing their characters in their writing is going to make a huge difference, especially when it comes to the writing sample for the district. Of course, I need to continue to work on all of the domains throughout the year.
Aligning classroom assessments to the state and district standards also helps prepare students for the state's high-stakes testing. In Pennsylvania, it's called the PSSA.
Our classroom assessments are tied to district initiatives. We're aligned with state standards and, of course, aligned with national standards, where we evaluate our standardized testing data, where we look at the turnover and we look at our PSSA. What we try to do is to assure that our curriculum-embedded assessments make sense in that they relate to the standardized assessments that are wrapped around the standards. Amber, hi. We're here to do our walkthrough questions. Are you ready to answer some questions from Mr. Hart? Okay, I'm going to
The Penn-Delco School District has developed a practice called a walkthrough. During the one-on-one interview, an adult other than the child's teacher asks the student a series of developmentally appropriate questions about his or her schoolwork.
What do you do to get ready to read a new text?
Predict what it's about.
Okay. How do you predict, Bobby?
The goal is to interview the entire grade level with the same series of questions. The district identified reading as the area to focus on.
Before you read something, what do you do to get ready when you read something new that you've never read before?
Predict.
Predict? How do you do that?
Guess what the story is going to be about.
They really look forward to this. They get very excited and very motivated by the fact that someone's going to be asking them to talk about the strategies that they understand.
Well, you look at the pictures and the title and you guess.
While you're reading the book, okay, what do you do when you don't understand what you've read?
You read it again, you reread.
You reread, okay, and then what happens after you reread, do you think?
You might know it a little better.
You might know it? The very first thing I'm looking for is comfort. I'm wanting the child to come sit down next to the principal and explain what they've been doing in class related to the questions that I was going to ask them.
I know your teacher sometimes asks you to make a summary, and I want you to tell me what you include in your summary.
The 5 W words.
What are they?
Who, what, when, where, why.
Okay.
Tell me what you should include in the summary.
The main ideas.
Okay.
And supporting details.
And supporting details.
The problem.
Okay.
The solution and problem. The characters.
Okay.
The setting.
The setting. The intention of a walkthrough is not to evaluate a teacher. It's to provide teachers with feedback as to how their students are progressing. It's my responsibility to communicate that message clearly and to set up a template or a feedback structure that's supportive. If you can create that type of dynamic of trust, collegiality, and understanding, and the focus is on the child, it's a lot more effective.
The setting.
That's pretty good.
What do you do when you don't understand something that you're reading?
You self-question.
What exactly does that mean? Or could you give me an example of some time that you self-questioned?
You would go back to the page you didn't understand, and then you would read it through and ask yourself a question while you're reading.
One of the questions in the walkthrough was, if you're reading a book, what strategies do you use? Understand what you've read.
Self-question.
And what does that mean?
You ask yourself questions like, do I understand what I'm reading?
And I wasn't hearing quite enough depth in the answers. They were able to rattle off the strategies, but I wasn't convinced that they could give me actual examples of where they used the strategies and really show me how they were doing it. So what that tells me is we're on the right road, but we're not quite there. We know what the strategies are. We know how to teach them. We have to get to the point that our students are using them all on their own. And that's one of the most important things that we're trying to do in Pendelco right now, is have the students use all of these things independently and really own them. Let's just see where our students are with math.
At the end of the day, the teachers meet for a debriefing to discuss the overall results of the walkthroughs.
And we sit down around a table and we look at all the answers, and as a group we decide where are our students, what do they really know, and what are the things that we need to work on a little bit more. Now just tell me about the first text to self-connection. What do you have for the story?
The Titanic started its first voyage.
And what do you have for your own life?
Me getting my first kitten.
And it's been very enlightening because we've actually been able to understand the strategies that the kids are not getting. And then we have the perfect starting point for moving to the next level.
Show me something in your log where you've made some type of connect. Oh, look at that. It says text to self and text to world and text to text.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me about that?
This is the one where I said about the flood.
Oh, back a couple years ago?
Yeah.
How did that remind you about the flood?
Because when the tank exploded, there was like a whole bunch of waves of molasses.
Mm-hmm.
And they got stuck inside their houses, and when we had the flood, we had to stay inside our houses too.
So that's a great connection. How about text to self?
It reminds me of when I was in kindergarten and I spilled my iced tea.
In school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Nice job. My people take it to heart. If a child doesn't perform or if a child completely shuts down, they notice it and they want to do something about it. You know, they want to make some type of modification or at least address that particular issue as to why that child had a problem during that particular walkthrough experience on that particular day.
The more we really involve the children in the process, the more they're going to want to work hard to reach whatever expectations we have for them.
A child needs to know how they're doing every day, almost every minute of every day. We all reach out. We all want to know how we're doing. I hope that my teachers are providing that feedback, that instantaneous feedback to children as they progress through the day. I'm proud of you. Your teacher's going to be proud of you too, don't you think? Think so? Okay. Thank you, sweetheart.
In whatever form it takes, assessment is an important element of every lesson. It is the way that teachers learn how to help their students meet the district and state standards. Learn what each student understands and doesn't understand, where they're strong and where they're weak. Whether it's a walkthrough or high-stakes assessment, report card, or writing sample, assessments give educators the vital information they need to meet the needs of every student in their classroom and take action to make learning successful.